Welcome to another Web Rough Cuts. In this video, I'd like to show you how I go through the process of beginning to set up the content styles for a website. So here I have a mock-up for DAH Solutions. It's just a single page site that's going to eventually look like this. But in this video, we're just going to focus on getting our font styles set up. So let's kind of sweep through and imagine what we have. This image here is going to come out, this logo I should say, is going to be exported as an image, but I'm going to place it in an H1. So I might want my H1 styles to kind of look like this by default, but at least we'll control some spacing settings there. This is an unusual paragraph, so we'll come back to it in a little bit. Here we have an H2 and an H3, a paragraph, and a list. However, these are kind of specialized styled because they're on this dark background. So I would say that this H2 and paragraph are a little bit more like what we will call our kind of normal paragraphs. Here we have another H3. Notice that it's a different color from this one, so we'll call this our normal H3. We have a block quote with a citation. We have a list of customers. And then we have a footer that includes a list of staff members, some copyright information, and a partnership statement. The staff members here have a little bit of specialized style in here that we're going to want to think about too. Okay, so knowing that here is where we're headed, let's go take a look at what we have in our styles, or in our document, so to speak. Oh, there's a module here that I don't have. And all right, here in our document you can see the H1 and that special paragraph that I mentioned. And then we have several sections marking off each of those main blocks of text. Here is that top block that would have the brown background, the H2, the H3, the paragraph, and the list. Then down here is all the about text, including an H2 and the normal paragraphs, the image, the block quote that we mentioned, including the citation, the list of customers, the footer, the list of staff members with some markings so that we can distinguish between the staff name and the staff title, and setting that apart from the staff contact information, and then the copyright statement and the partnership statement. All right, and just to give a glimpse of where we are to start, here we are. So this should remind you very much of what we have been working on so far in the course, where all we have is just solid markup. We don't have any considerations of look and feel, but things are at least structured the way they ought to be. And now we can consider how we want things to look. So here's the process. First of all, we have an external style sheet. So we're going to set up all of our styles over here. The first thing I want to do is get the fonts in that I have in my comp. And because I make a practice of using Google Fonts, what I want to start is by reminding myself of which fonts I actually have in this document. A nice helpful way to do this is to use the Craft Plugins library feature. Go to the document setting and click Sync Styles, or if you have never done this before, there may be a different command to begin with that would allow you to kind of set up your styles. What you can do then, this is a helpful feature that you can investigate more in another time, but this fonts block right here is very helpful in that it pulls together all of the fonts and different styles you have on the fonts so you can see what you need. So I see Manuel, Rocket, and variations of those. So that's very helpful because we only want to really load in from Google Fonts the actual settings that we're going to use. So with Manuel we have a regular and an italic and then a medium italic. And with Rocket, we have a semi-bold and a regular. So that's very helpful to know. Okay, you can disregard what it does down here. It's trying to imagine that you have headings and things, so don't worry about that for now. That's a whole different thing. But here's where we want to focus. So we're going to go over to our browser and go to fonts.google.com. Hopefully, when you've started a project, you've used this to begin with to find your fonts. If not, you're going to have a little bit of extra work to do to replace the fonts that you used with fonts from google.com because this makes things easy. So I found my Rocket font and I clicked the Add button, so it's now down here in my collection. I want to also find my Manuel font. All right, now they're both here. And it's trying to tell me here is what I could use to put these fonts in my document. But remember that I had some additional things I wanted to consider, because it's only got the regular setting on both of these enabled by default, and I have a specific set of those that I want. So yes, with manual I want regular and italic and medium italic. So regular, italic, and medium italic. All right, so that's good. Then down in Rocket, I want semi-bold and regular. So there's regular and there's semi-bold. Okay, we'll also just take a quick moment to notice the weight settings that are here. There's a 400 and a 500 in Manuel, and a 400 and a 600 in Rocket. All right, so having made those custom selections, you can see that it's updated the link to bring these in to include those weights and styles that I had selected. Very helpful. But we don't want to just grab this link. We want to go over to the @import and grab specifically this line that's between the style tags. So don't include those style tags, just include this @import. I grab this because most of the time I'm already in a style sheet like this, or I'm already in an internal style sheet and I don't need those style tags. But anyhow, there we have it. We've brought the fonts in, and now you've seen how to do that from fonts.google.com. Oh, I should not have killed that quite so fast. One other thing we want to note is that let me just get these in here. Oops. Is that in addition to giving me the import link, Google has also prescribed for me the font family settings I can use. So I'm going to copy those and paste them inside of a comment here in Codio, so that I can easily grab them later when I want them. Okay, so they're there. I can use them when I need them. Okay, so thank you, Google, for all of the font helpfulness. All right, so now the next thing I want to do is begin to think about what kinds of elements I have in my document and lay in those basic styles. So I remember that I had an H1, I had an H2, I had an H3, I had paragraphs, I had list items, I had a block quote, I had a citation. Let's see, we have hyperlinks. Let's see, I think that encompasses most of what we want to style. Now the other thing is I usually alphabetize these, so I just threw them in as I thought of them. There's just a little bit of rearranging to do to get them into alphabetical order. All right, so there we go. We've got a basic set of elements, and now what we want to do is begin to lay in the kind of standard, or what would be the normal styles for each of those. So let's start with one of the most normal ones, and that would be the paragraph. All right, so one of the things that we can observe in our document, let me switch back to my page, is size. So the body tag here is 14 pixels, or sorry, the paragraphs here are supposed to be 14 pixels or points in size. And so when we come into the web, we don't typically want to use points or pixels to make font sizes. We want to use one of the relative units, like rems or ems. Okay, so where I want to go is I want to be able to put some value in rems. Now 100 rems is ridiculous, but let's do 10 rems. The trick that I want to show you is that in order to match your font size precisely, see that's huge, right? Is to use the rems, but what you first want to do is set a base font size on the HTML tag of 10 pixels. This corrects the font size from 16 pixels. Now I just told you that we don't use pixels. This is the one place that we use pixels because 16 pixels is the default. So we're correcting that to be 10 pixels. So now When we set a font size of 1 rem, that's basically saying 1 times the root element, HTML, 1 times that element's font size. So now we're saying basically a paragraph should be 1 times 10 pixels, which is just 10 pixels, which is way too small. So we actually want them to be 14. So how do we get from 10 to 14? Well, we do 1.4. All right, so the basic rule is you go to your HTML tag, you put in a font size of 10 pixels. Then every element's font size can be the actual font size from the document, just moving the decimal place 1 digit to the left. Okay, so 1/10 of its font size. All right, so now you'll see that that is matching our size exactly, but there's more to do to get it to really match our comp. We need to think about the font, the weight, the color. The alignment is probably going to be already set right, but you might want to tweak that. We can also deal with the leading or line height and the space above or below the paragraph. In this case, it's 10 pixels. All right, so let's work down the list here. We've got all those settings right here in Sketch to work from. So we're going to set it to Manuel. So here's my Manuel font family setting. And then we want it to have the regular weight, which it is by default, but it doesn't hurt to make sure that we provide that. So font weight 400. Now remember, that's one of the weights that we brought over from our Google settings. So I like to use the weight there, but this is actually the normal weight, so normal would be okay. I do prefer when we know a 100 value to actually use that. Okay, so now we need the color, and Sketch makes this very easy. When you open this panel, you can just right away copy that hex value and then go into your colors or style sheet and paste that color in just like that. All right, so we have the size, the font family, the weight, the color. Now we need to think about line height. So here is line height, that's 20 pixels, which would be 2 rem. So line height 2 rem. And then the space after it would be set with margin. So it's important to note that with margin, a lot of elements have default margin already, and we're going to learn more about margin and padding in one of our upcoming lessons. But when we're caring about space around or between elements, even here in this stage, we can go ahead and consider those things. So we usually do that with margin, but it's helpful to set it to 0 first, and then come in and say just the one we want gets the 10, so 1 rem, actually. So this says so margin is actually a box model setting, and that means it's going to apply potentially to all 4 sides of the box. Again, things we'll cover more. So we're just setting that to be 0, so we're clearing it out, and then we're coming in and saying just the bottom of the box should have 1 rem of margin. All right, so when we come over here and refresh, we can see that those look really nice, and they should be very, very close to what we have from our comp. We are finally at that point now where we are actually trying to match appearance and match it precisely. The one thing that you'll find as you start to work on this that is hard to get to match is the weight, in that the browsers render the font weights a little bit different from the way our design tools do. So what you typically want to do is match what you have in your comp, and then if it doesn't seem right, you can override it in your browser, but we don't have any other option to get this to look a little bit lighter like it does here. So we're just going to stick with what we have there. But otherwise, everything matches precisely. Okay, so let's do another obvious one. I think these H2s are another good obvious one. Now, disregard that they're called H3s here in this style setting. In our markup, they're actually H2s. So we're using Rocket at a regular weight with this green color at 2.4 rem, with a line height of 3 rem, and a space after of 12, which seems strange to me. I probably would do something a little bit different there. But anyway, moving on, let's get all of those settings set up in our document. So Rocket is the font weight or font family for the H2s. And this is where doing some copy pasting might not be a bad idea. We can make more efficient use of our time by just overriding the settings. So it's still a 400 weight, but it should be a 2.4 font size. and a 3 rem line height. And at least for now, we have the 1.2 rem for the space below. But the color is not the brown color, it's this green color. So we're going to copy and paste that in. And there we have it. So let's go take a look. All right, so now you can see we've got the right setting on the headings and the right setting on the paragraphs. So we basically want to continue to repeat this process for all of our normal elements. So basically finding the place where you would consider the element in the mockup is setting the kind of normal styles, and we'd sweep through. So we would go through and do the normal H3s. Abby, that's too much noise, okay. And the block quote and the citations, but there's a lot of other things in here that are really customized styles. So this is where we're going to have to move beyond just tag selectors to some actual class selectors and nested selectors. So for example, this is a list of customers, and we want lists to have bullets by default. But we don't want bullets here or in this staff list. So we're going to want to select these lists in a more specific way and tell them to not have any bullets. So we're not going to set bullets to none here. We're going to want to select our customers. In fact, I want to make sure I get the right selector there because it's about customers. And then we want to say list items inside of about customers. So we're going to go about customers, list items, and we're going to say list style none. So this has allowed our list items to have bullets by default. So these should still have bullets when I refresh. But now we killed the bullets over here on the customer list, which is exactly what we wanted. We want to do the same thing on the list down here, and that is the footer staff list items. So again, we can use a nested selector to say footer staff list items, list style none. All right, so we've got that in, and we should now see that those bullets go away. Good. Now this is another case where another thing we want to adjust is the margin, because there's already some default margin here, and you can see that if we inspect, like I showed you in previous videos, and these list items are being pushed over. See that white space? Well, where is that white space coming from? If we browse around to other elements, we can see, oh, look at that. There is some spacing coming from the UL itself. It actually turns out to be padding on the inside, and we'll learn more about padding later, but this is one little thing you can go ahead and do. We're just going to set padding to 0. Same idea with margin. We're just kind of clearing out some of those browser defaults. I put it on both of those lists so that I have, oops, I put it on the wrong element because I want it on the UL that is in these cases. So I think footer staff was a UL, so I don't need to select ULs inside of footer staff. So let's prove that point. Okay, footer staff is a class directly on a UL, so we select that UL with just footer staff, and we say padding 0. Now for the customers, the about customers is on a div, but there is a UL inside of that div, so we can say about customers UL to select that UL and set padding to 0. Okay, so margin and padding will be covered more later, but we've at least cleared out some of those default settings, and I've shown you how you can be more specific to provide styles for just those things. Okay, so there are many more customizations to do to get this to work the way that we would want, to look exactly the way we want, but hopefully you've got the gist of the things that are necessary to move on with your projects.